Welcome.
Welcome.
We are north of Toronto in Canada, and we've got people from the United Kingdom and all over the U.S. and parts of Ontario and Canada. So we're a very international, diverse group. So welcome, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. So just bear with us. So we are this discussion relates to a whole food plant-based lifestyle, and we'll share what that is and give you some tips, and then provide you with some recipes at the end of the discussion. So we'll introduce who we are, what is a whole food plant-based lifestyle, why should we adopt a whole food plant-based lifestyle, and how to do it. So those are the topics that we'll do today. The major presenter is Janet Poirier. She's a retired registered nurse. She's certified in plant-based nutrition with E. Cornell Institute, and there's her email. We do these introductions, but we're also available anytime for discussions and to share what we've learned with you. I come along for the ride. I am Jim Poirier, and I'm retired as well. My claim to fame is that 12 years ago, I had triple bypass surgery. And then 2 years later, I had 3 stents put in. Both times I was basically almost 100% blocked, my arteries. And we discovered after my second incident, the book Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. And that started our plant-based journey. And 12 years in, I am basically cured of my heart disease, off medication, and living a very active life. I'm 70 years old, and we walk 10 to 12 steps, 10 to 12,000 steps a day, and we keep ourselves very active with no recurring illnesses. So, Janet is recovering from very severe arthritis, and she's totally cured, and all on a plant-based lifestyle. So we figured that if it helps us, it can help other people. So we hope that through our discussion today that you will get some benefit from considering a plant-based lifestyle. Okay, the information that we are sharing to you today is not to be considered as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your health provider with any questions you have or regarding your medical condition. Changing to a whole food plant-based lifestyle may result in rapid healing, and these changes maybe require an adjustment in your medication or dosage. So it's important to work with your doctor to monitor your condition. So what is a whole food plant-based lifestyle? Well, when you look at what it's not, is the standard American or Western diet. So for those of you in the United Kingdom, it includes various animal foods, dairy, highly processed foods, generally high in sodium or salt, saturated fat, and sugar, and is typically low in fiber, antioxidants, or polyphenols. It is typically associated with higher incidence of chronic inflammatory diseases such as obesity, heart disease, many cancers, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune diseases, dementia, and more. So it has been proven that the standard American diet is influential in causing many of these illnesses in people. A whole food plant-based diet describes foods that are minimally processed. They include plants like whole grains, fruits, vegetables, mushrooms, legumes, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices. A whole food plant-based lifestyle is more than a diet. It includes the effects of diet, exercise, stress management, and love and support in community. It is not viewed as a short-term punishment or charged by guilt. It is, sorry, going back. It is not a set of specific meal plans and sacrifices. This is a lifestyle. So what we're talking about is including in your diet predominantly whole foods, and you combine that with exercise, stress management, and love and support in community, and together they're the whole food plant-based lifestyle. Hippocrates, who is the father of lifestyle medicine, to which many doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, said many years ago, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And so we are looking at the benefits of eating plants to help you combat many of the common diseases that are found because of people eating a standard American diet. He also said, before you heal someone, ask them if they're willing to give up the things that make them sick. And this is really part of our struggles, because people are so used to their foods. I had a hard time giving up cheese and dairy, and so I was given an ultimatum: either you change your diet or you won't be here. But a lot of people that are doing it for other reasons, and their health may not be specifically affected, aren't willing to give up those kind of things that made them sick. And so we're going to talk about how you can do that, whole food. So why choose a whole food plant-based lifestyle? Janet.
Hello, everyone. As Jim had mentioned, we are all familiar with a standard American diet. We're hopefully more familiar with what is included in a whole food plant-based diet. There are many organizations, people say, well, how do you know this? There's been so many years of study, research that have gone into the recommendations that organizations actually stand behind. And you might be surprised that some of these are very well known. They admit that consuming a plant-based diet is deemed to be safe and effective. It's safe for all stages of life, including pregnancy, lactation, and it's effective for children and old age and for athletes. So a whole food plant-based diet is also the only way of eating ever shown to reverse chronic inflammatory diseases, such as the ones Jim mentioned: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, arthritis. Eating whole food unprocessed plants include a broad variety of colorful fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices. And these provide all the nutrients required for you to be healthy. The only ones that need to be discussed aside from this are vitamin B12 and perhaps vitamin D. Now, vitamin B12 is a vitamin that's very important for us to get. It's typically, we get it through bacteria in the soil. So years ago, when we were growing our carrots and stuff in the garden, and eating some of the soil that was in even the plants, we would be getting a little bit of B12. Those that ate some meat products would be also getting some B12, only because the cow or the animal that ate that vegetable or grain were eating some of this bacteria, so it came through in their meat. So that's the only reason. But now they're even finding people, when they test them, many people, even if they are meat eaters, were low in B12, so they also required supplementation. So it's an important thing to not leave out, and very easy to get with the supplement. Same with vitamin D. We get vitamin D from sunshine. If you're not available to be in the sun, or you live in a country that's 6 months of winter and you're not exposed to sun, it's also recommended that you take a vitamin D3 supplement as well for that, to make sure that you're good. Your doctor can actually test you for these levels too. So they do recommend getting tested to see where you're at with those and to make sure you're okay and getting enough. So there are other organizations that stand behind a plant-based diet or a vegan diet. American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, the American Diabetes Association, the Canadian Diabetes Association, also Canada's Food Guide. It came out recently in 2019 and made some major changes to be mostly plant-based. I mean, they kept some higher protein foods on there, included some meat-based proteins, but encourages everyone, if you read through the guide, encourages you to eat more plant-based sources of protein like beans more often instead of meat. And they also took dairy off as a requirement. So milk and dairy products are not required on that. And they say to use water as your main drink of choice. Dietary guidelines in other countries also stand behind a plant-based diet and the benefits to your health. The Dietary Guidelines Committee from the US and also the American Institute of Cancer Research stands behind very much a plant-based diet as far as prevention of cancer and in reversal of disease. So that's interesting. If you look up any of these associations online and look for their diet recommendations, this is what you're going to find. There's a doctor, Dr. Dean Ornish. He's one of the early fathers of this lifestyle medicine. He's been, I think, vegan for over 40 years. He has a program in the US that's covered under Medicare. So he is actually a cardiologist plus an internist. And so he works with patients through his program, which they do actually online now. Since COVID happened, they brought this program online. And because of its success, it's really the first program that's ever been covered through Medicare in the US because of its great success in helping people reverse their disease and to prevent disease. So he talks about this video, this little picture here, this little cartoon, where our current system is really more designed for disease care rather than health care. So we're seeing these two people, doctors, mopping up the floor furiously with drugs and surgeries, et cetera, to curb disease. And someone said, well, wouldn't it be easier just to turn off the tap? So get at the underlying cause of these diseases in order to prevent the needed disease care after the fact. So we believe that eating a whole food plant-based diet is really healthcare in its essence and prevents disease.
Turns off the tap.
It turns off the tap, yes. So there's very much consistent evidence that whole food plant-based foods are protective to our health. Genes can be turned on or off. If you wanted to listen to Dr. Ornish, he has a really good presentation on YouTube, which you can find. These are all free to listen to. If you look for the one, he's got several. He talks similarly in all of them, but he talks about genes being able to be turned off, upregulated or downregulated. So it upregulates your supportive genes and downregulates your disease promoting ones. So this isn't your destiny. A lot of people think, oh, I have my grandfather, my mother, my family all had diabetes, so I'm going to get diabetes. Apparently, you do have genes that potentially have the potential for happening, but we have the control through diet and lifestyle to affect even our genes that are present and to not allow them to bring us into these diseases. So heavily processed food, fast food, fried food, trans fats and saturated fats, sugar and salt are found to be damaging to our health. And the standard American diet is pretty much full of a lot of these things. Anything that's processed, generally, if you read a package ingredient list, you'll see these ingredients on that ingredient list. So meat, especially processed meat and red meat, increases disease risk. It has no fiber. It is very high in saturated fat and actually has been proclaimed, the processed meat has been claimed class 1 carcinogens by the World Health Organization, and all the other red meats, which includes beef, pork, and lamb, as well as some of the other animal foods, including chicken, eggs, and fish, are all consistent with increased all-cause mortality and increased risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and others. When we talk about plants, one topic of conversation comes up all the time, and it's about calorie density. When we first started eating this way, we eat quite a bit of food. You can eat more food than you would think, because plant foods are generally lower in calorie than animal-based products. So whole plant foods are also the most nutrient dense. They have the most vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, polyphenols, all those good stuff. And they're also the lowest in calories. So that's why you can eat a lot of them. You're getting a lot of nutrients from them, and they provide the nutrients that you need, and you're getting them at a low calorie cost. So greens provide the lowest calorie and the highest nutrient density of all the foods. So this would include kale, Brussels sprouts, lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower, all those nice cruciferous vegetables, and all the greens, very, very high in nutrient density. Also, we include starches like potatoes, sweet potatoes. These are high in fiber. They are also higher in calories, so they're more satiating. So including some of the starches along with the greens and the cruciferous vegetables will keep you full. They provide a lot of fiber. They keep you satisfied. Your cravings for the things that you thought you needed, such as sugar, salt, and fat, actually go down. Once you get satiated on this food, it's not long before you start to realize that your cravings do reduce. Your taste buds change, and you're able to really enjoy these foods without all the additives that are normally found on your vegetables, such as butter and salt and sugar and that type of thing.
And our bodies, after a few months, went back to their basic our high school weight.
Mm-hmm.
And we eat more than we ever did, simply by eating a whole food plant-based diet. So it is a wonderful way to reduce increase your appetite while still lose weight. So and that just happened. We didn't try to do that. I did this for my diet to increase my heart's ability to pump blood around the body, and lo and behold, Janet and I both I lost about 30 pounds, and Janet lost 10 or 15. And we feel a lot better because there's less stress on our limbs, etc.
This Dr. Esselstyn that Jim mentioned earlier, the book Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease was our first book. He really talks about greens a lot in his promotion of what we should eat. So he likes you to include like up to 6 servings a day, because it keeps this what's called nitric oxide production from greens that we're eating. And nitric oxide is a very important nutrient that lowers inflammation. It allows your healing of your arterial walls, and it reduces the incidence of coronary artery disease. So it's a very important substance produced by eating plants, especially greens.
And it's not just your heart; it's strokes. It's everywhere that blood goes into the body. It increases that flow of blood. So the risk of a stroke are even reduced because of a plant-based diet.
Mm-hmm. So this little chart shows it quite well, actually. It shows that calorie density that you're looking for. So if we were to look at oil or cheese or meat, you see that there's very little filling of your stomach to get 500 calories and what it might look like. So part of your feeling full is actually your stretch receptors in your stomach. So filling it, you're going to feel full, you're going to, and you're not filling it with a lot of calories. When you look at the fruit and vegetables portion there, it takes a lot of fruits and vegetables to make 500 calories in comparison to the oil, cheese, and meat. Adding potatoes, rice, and beans, it looks the starchier foods. That is a little bit less filling than the less amount required, because it is a little bit more calorie dense. So it's important to include some of those as well as the fruits and vegetables, but leaving out the other things, you're actually filling your stomach. Your stretch receptors are telling you you're full and you're satisfied. some of the comparisons, when we look at plant foods in comparison to animal foods, we see that plant foods are high in fiber. There's no fiber in animal-based foods. Also, plant foods have no cholesterol. Animal foods, on the other hand, are very high in cholesterol. Plant-based foods low in fat, animal foods high in generally saturated fat, which is the most serious one that we would like to avoid. Calorie density, very low with plant-based foods, and animal foods are higher in calorie density. So antioxidants are very rich in plant-based foods, and actually animal foods have been shown to be carcinogenic. As I mentioned before, the processed meats such as bacon, sausage, hot dogs, all those deli meats and that type of thing are considered class 1 carcinogens. So it's very different from plant-based foods. And even water content in plants very high, and it's very low. So generally speaking, most people aren't drinking enough water, and getting a lot of fluid through your food is one way of helping to enrich your water intake, aside from drinking water. So you should be drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, but you're getting a lot of that water in plant foods already, which is good.
And ironically, it takes umpteen more gallons of water to create the meat products as it does the plant products.
It's good. So looking at this comparison, we look at a plant versus the plant being beans and compared to beef. Now, beans are considered to be one of the highest starch-based foods, protein-based food. So we're looking at a comparison of 100 grams of beef here to 100 grams of beans. Though they both are similar in protein content, the beans have fiber, the meat does not. The beans have iron, a lot more iron than the beef. Calcium, much higher than the
beans
beef.
has more iron.
That's what I said. Didn't I say that?
No, I said that.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, the beans have the most iron, the most calcium, more magnesium. They have no cholesterol as opposed to the 74 milligrams in the beef. And also the cost. People talk about, oh, it's costly to eat plant-based. If you're looking at beans and general vegetables and fruits, you're going to see a cost comparison. We found to be able to eat much more reasonably on a plant-based diet. So if you look at the price of that beef, and this is an older slide, so it might even be more than that, and beans might be a little higher than 50 cents, but still there is no comparison in the difference between the two. And the amount of water, as Jim mentioned, it takes a lot of water to process meat as compared to beans and other vegetables. So that's our choice, the beans. There are a lot of myths. Besides the protein in food, we've been told always since birth that we need to eat meat and dairy for protein, and also dairy for calcium. So these are kind of myths that have generated through the years that people are still believing in many cases. But we learned that calcium is present in the soil. It comes through the plants, through the soil into the plants. We do require calcium. It's very important for brain functioning, heart, muscles, and bones. But we don't need to get it from dairy products, and we don't need to get it from meat. So that the largest animals on the planet that we know of, such as rhinoceroses, elephants, you name it, those big, heavy, bony creatures, all get their nutrients from plants. They don't eat animals. Populations of people around the world, they've studied, who are leading the least amount of dairy products, seem to have the fewer cases of osteoporosis or bone loss, also the fewer cases of cancer and heart disease. So you'd think if dairy was so good for our calcium and our bones, that the US and Canada, and probably the UK too, would see more cases of, or less cases of osteoporosis, but it's just the opposite. So dairy products like milk and cheese are also the highest source of saturated fat, animal protein and calories, and they have all been associated with higher incidence of disease.
and they're cheese is full of salt, very high salt.
Yes, very high in salt. Yeah, the processing of that dairy product. Just before that. Okay, so carbohydrates. So that's the other myth. Protein, calcium, carbs are bad for you. We've all heard that. So a whole food plant-based diet on this side of the fence is all carbohydrate, pretty much, and full of resistant starch. So simple carbohydrates, like the ones found in processed flour, simple sugars, they can be processed down into these simple forms of sugar, which are very quickly and suddenly absorbed into the bloodstream, raising our blood sugar levels and requiring more insulin to be produced to control that sugar. But if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet with lots of fiber, you're not peeling your vegetables, you're eating whole grains, not processed grains, you're eating brown rice instead of white rice, you're eating whole grain breads as opposed to white breads, that type of thing, you're going to be getting a more resistant starch. You're getting more fiber, which helps to feed your gut bacteria. It helps to promote these short chain fatty acids that promote health through the body, and every cell uses these fatty acids produced. So resistant starches in these foods, such as beans, whole grain breads, whole grains such as barley, wheat, there's many of them. Buckwheat are ones that are typically people aren't familiar with as much. But there's a lot of grains that you suddenly start to see. It's not just wheat and oats anymore. It's this broad variety of carbohydrate-rich foods, including these grains. The resistant starches that are produced in these foods are very slowly digested as opposed to rapidly. So that really slows that insulin spike requirement. It slows the blood sugar. It's normal that we would see blood sugar rising after eating any type of food, but your body will normally regulate that into a speed that's good for your digestion. So yeah, carbohydrates are important, just not the processed ones. So the benefits of fiber. So we see digestive health really escalating, and there's a lot more talk these last couple of years on the role of fiber and starch in the diet to help support even our gut bacteria, which is vital for our overall immune system health. So they found that about 70% of our immunity relies on a healthy bacteria found in our gut. And this is directly connected to our brain health as well. So we see improvement in insulin sensitivity, as I mentioned, lower insulin spikes, lower blood sugar raises, prevention of obesity, reduces cholesterol levels. It reduces oxidative stress. So fiber is really key, a key nutrient in most of the foods that we eat. Most of our health responses that we get are based on our good, healthy gut bacteria, or otherwise called microbiome. And you've probably heard that term before. People that eat a lot of animal-based foods, as I mentioned, are getting no fiber. Their gut microbiome is a different response. So you would get less of these short-chain fatty acids being produced as a result. So plants are really beneficial for our gut health. So we are all, victims of what we hear, what we see, why we make decisions, and everyone looking at a plant-based way of living, you might have a different thought process of why am I interested in this, or why is this important to us or me. For Jim and I, he mentioned about our reason for changing, and we saw our why come to a big change in our life for the better. But go on to the next slide, Jim. We have different reasons. Many people have their own reasons for choosing this way of living. And having strong whys is very empowering for making any changes that you make meaningful and lasting. And I think it's important, we were open to change, we were open to learning. And when we first learned about the possibility of reversing Jim's heart disease, we were excited about it. And we decided this is worth a try because there was so much evidence to support it. When we first, it was a couple of years after we started eating this way that the documentary Forks Over Knives came out. It's still available to be seen on the Forks Over Knives website. For a while it was on Netflix, but it's been taken down. But you can still see that documentary on the Forks Over Knives website, forksoverknives.com. And you'll get access to the video. If you've not seen it, it's worth seeing. For many people that see that video, it becomes their reason, their why for jumping in. And many people have, decided to go plant-based based on that video itself. We had a friend who we shared the video with. We had a version of it, like you can buy the DVD. So we had a DVD we lent to him, and we got it back the next day because we were seeing him the next day. And he said he ordered 10 copies for the people that he loved. So that was the initial impact that he felt just by watching that documentary. So it's worth taking a look at. There are many people. We've learned so many more doctors, more dietitians since we first started this whole process. The area is expanding of the number of plant-based physicians, plant-based dietitians, places where you can get support. So two of the plant-based dietitians that I really enjoy watching them and hearing from them is Brenda Davis. She is a Canadian. And she is on, I think I've got that wrong. Let me see. She's at BrendaDavisRD.com. Yeah, I think that's incorrect. I was just reading my BrendaDavisRD.com is her site, and plantbaseddietitian.com is Juliana Heather. Juliana Heather is from California. And they are both really active in the plant-based community for years and years. They've been supporting it. If you go to their websites, you will learn a lot more from them. They also have blogs, they have YouTube presentations, they have, they are speakers on summits that you can get attached to through summits and presentations. And they talk about the benefits. The benefits of plant-based diet are broad. Aside from optimum health, reducing risk of and reversing disease, many people go on a plant-based diet for weight management, to increase their longevity, to improve their quality of living, reduce pain and suffering that goes along with many diseases, improves your energy, performance, and recovery. And we find as we learn more about eating plant-based, the sustainability to our planet is much greater if we don't eat meat and don't require animal agriculture. On that note, it is more compassionate because we're aware of the suffering that animals go through. The mass production of animals and the 80 billion animals that are killed annually is almost unimaginable. So we appreciate the compassion behind eating this way. The economical value of eating this way is much less economical to produce meat than it is to produce plants. So there's a lot of benefits in many categories. So the environmental side of it is very much strong as we learn more about climate change and what's going on in the world. So those are all an outline of the many benefits. So we learned that really everything is connected. Our own health, the health of the planet, the health of animals, and turns out what is good for human health is also best for animals and the rest of the world. So some people say, well, how do I do this? How do I even start? It sometimes seems mind-boggling because We're challenged by family, friends, coworkers that, may say, what are you doing that for? It can be intimidating. It can take some energy to learn new things. And it may also go against many of the habits, the traditions, the cultural norms, the paradigms, and even many of these myths that we've talked about that are so ingrained in us. And many are also addicted to many of these foods. The sugar, the salt, the fat, it's a very addictive food. So it's, how do we get over those things that are challenging us to even start? I wrote this, this is a slide from previous, but it reminds me of summits and presentations that you can find. This was this year in April to May, and then another one in May 5th to the 21st, the Real Truth About Health Summit, the Food Revolution Summit. They're ongoing, and you'll see these things coming up annually, sometimes more often than that, where you can actually go in and listen to some of these plant-based physicians speaking. There's actually one coming up for people living in the US near Omaha, Nebraska. There is a presentation, it's a one-day event that's happening there in September. And we actually met, Jim and I met the people that started this whole process there in Omaha. So they have had, over the last 3 years, they've had a one-day event where they basically emphasize the health value for their health, but also bring in the other topics of discussion as well. There's things like that going on all the time. And if you get on, I guess, Facebook groups, if you get on Facebook groups such as Forks Over Knives, Plant Pure, Dr. McDougall's, Starch Solution, there's different health Facebook groups that you can go on and search and join these groups, because you're going to get discussion from a lot of people that bring up good questions, and probably that's going through the very same thing that you are if you're new to this. So it's those are good support places to look, and that's where you learn a lot about the events that are going on that you can sign up for, and many of them are free. Yeah, the one that I just spoke about in Omaha, Nebraska is healthyforalifetime.org. If you were to go on that site, you'll see that. And it's just interesting, when Jim had his first surgery, he had it in Omaha, Nebraska, as he was traveling for work. And so he ended up in the hospital there and had his surgery before coming back to Canada. So we kind of have a little soft spot in our heart for Omaha, because at the moment it kept him alive to learn more about this later. So these things that people do, like getting stents, having surgery, they're BandAids. They're not cures for the underlying cause, but they can save you. Sometimes, and sometimes they are required. But the goal is to not ever have to get to that point. And so let's continue. How do you do this? Set a goal. Sometimes that's the first thing. Becoming aware of something is the first action, but then taking action. Once you learned about something, it's, okay, how do I do this? So setting a goal, set some dates, set some places to look, do some research. These documentaries that we're gonna list some of those later in the talk.
Yeah, we'll provide you with some information
but
on
places where you can find out more. There's so much information now, but start simply. You don't expect to be 100% in no time. It takes some effort, it takes some time. Some people look around their kitchen and they look in their freezer and say, well, I've got this, and this to eat up before I go plant-based. But it's getting the goal, it's getting started, and getting started is a big deal. We had talked about before, working with your physician. Many people are on medication. It's such an important thing to work with your doctor. Let your doctor know what you're doing if you're planning to make a change in your diet like this. Many times you will be able to come off some of those medications, such as high blood pressure medications, some diabetes medications and that type of thing. So it's really important to monitor your health once you're starting in this process. And to be positive, don't get down on yourself. If you have a bad day, oh well, get back up and try again and look after yourself and don't be hard on yourself. It's really not about being perfect. It's about working towards that ultimate goal. But we do need to take responsibility. Sometimes you feel maybe alone because not everybody is on board. But once you learn for yourself, it's you that you're helping. It's your responsibility to kind of keep yourself up on things and to start. So there are many helps resources. Some people even like to look for plant-based doctors, dietitians in their area. In the US, I know there's a plant-based telehealth going on, and there's pcrm.org/find-a-doctor. You can go to these sites in the US and you will find physicians, some of them even working under Medicare, under insurance plans that could help you. So if you're looking for a plant-based doctor, you may find one in your area, and it might be helpful. In Ontario here, we were able to find a plant-based physician who Jim got hooked up with, who's an hour and a half, 2 hours away from us, but we rarely have to see him anymore because Jim is doing so well and doesn't really require a lot of support. We're kind of doing our thing and it's working. You might find some documentaries that I mentioned before. There's Forks Over Knives, which is a really good one to start with. Podcasts from people. If you go on YouTube, the list of doctors that we're going to give you will all have YouTube presentations, which are all good to listen to. So they get you started. Picking a book up. We had the Reverse and Preventive Reverse Heart Disease book. We got the Starch Solution from Dr. McDougall shortly after that. And we got the China study from Dr. T. Colin Campbell as well. So there are many books, many doctors, many places to get support.
And that list is growing.
It's continuously growing, which is really good to see. So these are some of the doctors that I would recommend, and these are their websites. So Dr. Neil Bernard out of Washington, Dr. Esselstyn is in New York, Dr. Ornish, I believe in California, Dr. Furman, Dr. Greger, Dr. Clapper, Dr. Davis, Garth Davis. The next slide has more.
Misleading people.
Yeah. Dr. Kahn, Joel Kahn, Dr. Pamela Popper, Dr. Linda Carney, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, Dr. Cyrus Kambata, and Robbie Barbero. Those two guys are interesting because Dr. Kambata is a PhD in science. And they're both type 1 diabetics. So they're good ones to look into if you have diabetes. They also have a book out, Mastering Diabetes, and they have a lot on their website. Dr. T. Colin Campbell, Dr. John McDougall, Dr. Brooke Goldner. These are all really valuable people to look into with tons of information. They all have books, they all have websites, and they all have YouTube presentations. These are some of the documentaries that you might be looking at. The latest one that came out was Eating Our Way to Extinction. So that combines the human health, planetary health, animal welfare in one big bundle. Seaspiracy, The Game Changers, What the Health, they've all come out over the last few years. Forks Over Knives was one of the early ones, but it's still very pertinent and very worthwhile seeing. So those are some of the documentaries.
The Game Changers talks about professional athletes that are on plant-based diets. You see, a plant-based diet, because it's able to, you recover quicker because of all of the there's the acid that builds up from when you eat meat, because the The plant is lower in that
It's more alkaline.
it's more, yeah, that's the word I was looking for, sorry. It's more alkaline, and therefore you're able to recover quicker. We can do physical strenuous exercise, and the next morning we don't feel it because of that.
So the athletes are finding that even with their strenuous, whatever exercise they're doing within their sport, they're having much better recovery. And you're seeing a lot of athletes, every field of athlete, many of them have gone plant-based or towards plant-based just for this reason alone, just because of the stamina that they get from that way of eating. So those are all, good places to look. Books to read. You can even look in your library. We have found books in the library, and you can order books on Amazon. Some of the ones that we have are the Start Solution, the Preventive versus Heart Disease book, How Not to Die by Michael Greger, the China Study by Dr. Campbell. I also have The Future of Nutrition from him, which is a later book, and he also has a book called Whole, which is excellent. Dr. Ornish's latest book is Undo It. I was actually able to get that one from our local library, and it's very good. Dr. Garth Davis has one called Proteinaholic. Dr. Neil Barnard. Dr. Neil Barnard is an amazing guy out of Washington. They have done so much work through government lobbying, etc., to get better food in hospitals, better food in schools. They are an amazing organization, and they also have a really good podcast, which is really excellent. And I can't think of the name of the podcast now. It's just left my brain. Troy, you remember that one? I can't remember. Anyway, he's got a lot of information on his website and through books, lots of books, and he's done a lot of study towards diabetes. And actually, they're connecting now. A lot of the newest studies are connecting brain health, such as Alzheimer's. Where that's going is interesting. All the different types of cancers. It's ongoing studies, and research never stops. Dr. Bolsowitz, the latest one from him, he's an excellent gastroenterologist. So when we talked about fiber and the importance of fiber in your diet, Fiber Fueled is his latest book. Plus, he does a lot of things on his website and online and through YouTube talks. And he's interviewed by different people on podcasts. So he's an interesting one to listen to, talking about the microbiome and how important that is, about connecting the dots between our stomach and our brain. So step 3 of this whole process might be not only emptying stuff from your freezer and your fridge, but going shopping. What do I do when I go shopping? The old adage, if it's in your house, it's probably in your mouth at some point. So some people need to take the food away that's less tempting. Just get the foods that you want to eat. Getting rid of those things that you'd rather not have around is a helpful start for many people if they have problems with food addiction. We find it interesting shopping in the grocery stores. We can skip whole aisles. We shop the edges. So the produce section, we do buy some canned foods. We'll go on to the next slide, Jim, and we'll see some of the stuff that you're going to look for. So in the fresh vegetables and fruits department, you're looking at all the vegetables and fruits, which are endless, and eat all of it. Vary up your selection. Multicolors. The colors are important to include because they all have different types of antioxidants related to those colors in the food. So eating a wide variety will give you different antioxidants, different polyphenols, all those things that are so important for your health and that make them so nutrient dense. Frozen foods, a lot of these fruits and vegetables can be bought frozen as well, especially some of the berries. We find, it's better for us to buy frozen blueberries, for example, than fresh because of, first of all, the cost factor we find a bit less, and the freshness. A lot of these frozen things are frozen at the peak of their ripeness, so they maintain their nutrition. So Yeah, we might store, I've got leftovers written on this slide too, because a lot of the things that you might make too much of can go in the freezer for later. So frozen foods are good. Dry goods, you're looking at whole grains. You're looking at some things that you might not have heard of before, such as nutritional yeast, which is a plant, a killed yeast. It's not like baker's yeast. It's not what you use for baking. It's a high protein food that's got a cheesy, nutty flavor, and it can be used in cheese sauces and different things that you want to flavor with that flavor of that cheesy flavor. Nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds is one of the things that you have to be careful with, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we get to the chart. You're going to buy whole grain breads if you can, and you might be drying dried beans or canned beans, but they're both good. You want to look for, you have more control when you're buying the dried beans because you can control the salt and everything like that and the amount of cooking, and maybe a little bit cheaper getting them in dried form and cooking them. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell things that you might be buying, plus the fresh fruits, lots of fruits. So we're into fruits too. You're still going to have some of those condiments in your kitchen, ketchup and mustard and relishes and different things that you like just to make your food interesting. If you're not adding so much salt, you might be wanting to use some salsa or some hummus, different things that you're going to put on a baked potato or into dishes that give it flavor. Herbs and spices come in here as well because they help to replace the salt and sugar by giving more flavor. So those are all good things that you're going to use a lot of in your cooking. Some things that the miscellaneous list here has some tofu, which is a soybean product. So you can get tofu or tempeh, which is a fermented form of tofu, which is very good for you. Even fermented vegetables such as sauerkraut. We make our own sauerkraut because we want it to have that good bacteria in it. Same with miso. Miso is a fermented grain or bean. You've probably heard of miso soup. It's a bit of a saltiness to it because it is a fermented food as well. So adding a little bit of that or some sauerkraut or like the tempeh, which is a fermented bean rather. Those things all add to your nutrition and bring good bacteria to your gut. Yeah, we'll go to that. As I mentioned before, a little bit about Canada's food guide. It's a big document. If you wanted to go search it out, foodguide.canada, canadasfoodguide.ca/food guide, you will see this guide, and it includes a lot more than just what we eat, it's how we eat. And so the how we eat is very helpful to include in this because it does affect our eating habits. You know, they encourage cooking more at home, eating out less, where you're going to tend to have more junk food, and about enjoying your food, eating with meals with others and socializing and all those things that make food so much a part of our life. We need to have more attention to food labels. Read the ingredients on a package, see what's in there. If it's high in salt and fat, maybe don't buy that. You know, just there's a dietitian called Jeff Novick who I find interesting because he said anything on the front of a label, if it says it's healthy for you or it's good for you, it likely is not. So read the fine print, read the ingredients, and don't rely on what's on the front of a package. Okay. It can be deceiving.
The one thing for you folks that aren't in Canada, it's available to you too. You could just go to the website. But the benefit, the interesting story about the Canada's Food Guide was it was prepared without the influence of industry. It was developed by doctors and scientists who specialize in plant-based and nutrition. And so there wasn't that influence of the milk and the dairy and the egg industry which oftentimes can really skew a report because of the money that they're putting into the creation of it. So in Canada, it was created without that. And it's interesting that the US did a new upgrade to their food guide as well, but it basically didn't change. And it was done with the influence of the major industry groups.
Mhm. So there's a look at the Canada's Food Guide plate, what they recommend. So half your plate should be fruits and vegetables, a quarter whole grains, and a quarter another of like a more intense protein food. So you'll see some an egg in there. You'll see some other things besides plants, but they also say include beans more often as your choice of a protein. They've done studies through the blue zones. The blue zones are portions of the world where they've done intensive research on areas where they live the longest and are the healthiest. And beans is the common denominator in all those blue zones. I think there's 6 or 7 blue zones throughout the world where they've studied longevity, where people have still their thinking, they still are active into their 80s, 90s, 100s. And beans are the common denominator in them all. So they say it's a very important protein to include, and we should be having some of those every day.
Oh, and if you notice, water is the drink of choice.
Water's a drink of choice. This is a handy guide that I like because it gives kind of, people often say, well, how much of that do I need? How much should I have in a day? So this kind of gives you an idea. The vegetables, eat as much as you want.
I guess the servings here are important. I would say at least 3 or 4 servings a day of fruit. At least include starchy vegetables on the vegetable. Eat as much and as many of the vegetables as you want. There's no limit. Whole grains, which is quinoa, brown rice, farro, buckwheat, barley, whole grain, pasta, and sprouted grains. 5 or more servings a day. Leafy green vegetables. Eat at least 2 or 3 servings daily. And some eat a lot of grains. And the legumes, 2 to 3 servings a day. And then the high fat whole foods, which would be your avocado, your nuts, your dairy substitutes such as almond and soy milk, those kind of things. Just don't overdo it. So all you can basically eat in fruits and vegetables, and you'll be good to go.
Plus the B12, yeah. Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen helps to explain that too. So if you go to nutritionfacts.org, you'll get Dr. Greger. And Dr. Greger has little vignettes and he has transcript. If you want to read it, you can read a transcript. He often has a little video to talk about different topics. And you can search his site for pretty much any topic that you want to learn more about. But he has one that's called the Daily Dozen. So if you wanted to look at that one, he goes through kind of on an average what you should be shooting for in a day just to get adequate amounts. And these are just the basic amounts. As Jim said, you can eat as much of the greens and fruits and vegetables as you want, basically, without fear of gaining weight, without missing any nutrients at all. Just being careful of the higher fat foods, such as nuts and seeds, where they recommend just like about an ounce, 1 to 2 ounces a day maximum, because they're very high in fat, even though they're plants. You have to be careful about the amount of that you're getting because of the high fat content and the high caloric content. So nuts are one of those things that it's easy to open a bag and eat a cupful before you know it.
It's interesting to note that what's not there, and what's not there is what many people probably feel should be part of a whole food plant-based diet, is oils. We limit the oil that we eat, even if it's a quality olive oil, because oil, as we showed in the satiation pictures of the stomach, oil is very high in calories, and there's no food value in oil. That may be the hardest thing for a lot of people to adjust to, and it may take some time, but you may want to look up, especially Dr. Greger on nutritionfacts.org, where he talks about the damaging effects of oil on our system. And when we talk about it in the discussion, we can talk about that too.
So yeah, the steps to help you, as Jim mentioned, there's how do you cook without oil? So there's ways of doing that with just water and broth instead of oil. It's quite easy to do once you learn that, because we're so used to, thinking you have to saute onions and garlic in oil, but you can use water. Batch cooking becomes your friend, making things in bunches, freezing parts, having some for the next day. So you don't feel like you're cooking all the time. You might make 2 or 3 dishes and you've got enough to last for several days, or even some for the freezer, because a lot of these things freeze very well, a lot of the dishes that you would make. Learning substitutions for replacing meat, dairy, eggs, and oil in your recipes. So that's something that you can learn through websites, and also a lot of the dietitians will talk about this, how to cook. And there's chefs like Chef AJ. If you like cooking shows, she has a lot of cooking demonstrations. And also there's the plant-based cooking show, which is really good to, the plant-based cooking show. Troy can put that in the chat maybe for you. She is a girl that does a lot of cooking demos, has a nice way about her. We're thinking low fat, we're thinking carbs are good for you, starches are good for you. Be creative with your leftovers and be able to try new things. Be gentle on yourself, as we mentioned before, and just go at your own speed, working towards your goal. So these tips that we talk about today, in an hour, it's really hard to address everything that needs to be talked about. And so, it's hard. This is basically the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot more underneath the surface that you will learn as you go. And we did slowly but surely. We learned a lot more, and we learned how to be comfortable, I guess, with the way we eat, not wanting to go back to the ways that we did before. The benefits are enormous, and there's so much to gain. So we encourage you to eat the rainbow, eat every food imaginable that you can get within this world of plants. And it's a beautiful world, really. It's so fun to try different things, to test new recipes. We've just written down some of our kind of just a category of a few things here that we like to make. Your chilies, pastas, beans and rice, muffins, different things that you will find fun and interesting to make, burgers. So a lot of times you can it's called veganize or plant-based, make an old recipe that you might have had before that you really liked. And just by eliminating some of the things and replacing with a couple things, you can make those things as well that you're used to having, such as the burgers and pastas and chilies and different things that you're all accustomed to eating. So it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of patience, and you can get there, but you don't have to do everything in a day. So these are just some, at the end of this, there's a bunch of slides. I think Troy may have that he can post on the chat.
I just did.
Okay. There's a recipe group that you can pull off the chat. At the end of this list, Jen, if you go down.
Potato dish is really good.
Potato dish is good. I find that we're using
black bean burgers.
Yeah, a lot more different spices than we maybe wouldn't have used before, such as cumin and curry, like the Indian spices. So there's a lot to look at. There's a lot of sources. I put a list at the end here of some of my favorite places to look for recipes. So Brand New Vegan, forks over knives, nutritiously. These are all really, really helpful websites with a ton of information, and they all have search engines. So if you're looking for a particular thing, like say potato salad, you can just search potato salad and it'll come up to find that recipe.